Good morning. We have a couple minutes here. Make sure that everybody online comes online wants to. So if we start early, they may not. So I'll wait for the next 3 minutes or so. But let me walk you through the photographs in this paper. It'll make what we have to say later well, maybe clearer. The first page you see is a setup. It's an outline in wrought iron of a horse feeding from a trough. It's the way things are shown sometimes when there's enough running and enough time since excavation for people to think of how to do these things. And that's what a stable at Megiddo might have looked like, only it was much huger than this. One biblical record in 2 Kings says that Solomon had 40,000 stables. So multiply this by whatever number we get these two, I mean 40,000, to understand stables. The second thing is you see the word T-E-L-L, that means a mound of several occupations. In the case of Megiddo, it's 20 occupations from the Neolithic period. I'm inconsistent throughout this paper. Sometimes I spell it T-E-L, and sometimes I spell it T-E-L-L. Well, scholars are equally inconsistent. And I learned T-E-L-L years ago, and so I tend to do that when in fact, perhaps today, we're more efficient in our use of letters and using them more. Page 2, you will see the stables. This is the northern stables at Tel Megiddo. You can't see those anymore because in 1920, the University of Chicago leading a dig here actually did away with that and removed that layer. Understand, if you're exposing layers and there's 20 layers, you can't just stop. You have to get down to bedrock and know you've really excavated the whole town. So sooner or later, you have to leave pieces standing and move deeper. So what you see on page 2 at the top can't be seen anymore. This is a picture taken in the 1920s before they excavated beneath that area. But this is, notice how many, I think I counted 8 or 9 stable rows through here, and about 26 horses per row. So archaeologists, they say that they find at Megiddo 860 stable stalls. But this is a 1920 photo. We can't see that if we go to that. The next picture down is a picture of a model in the museum at Megiddo. And if you see this bright line and you wonder what it is, right in this lower part of the picture here, this slanted thing is the mound as it goes up. It is kept purposely clean, no trees, no nothing on it. This is a model, of course, trees won't grow here, but you understand what I'm saying. This lighted area is a slide out part of the exhibit. You can just, as a person at the museum, you can slide that out and see what the top looked like at another excavation level. The other reason it's there, and we'll talk about it again, because I used this picture twice. You'll see the major gate. That's a part of our presentation today. The major gate that is the entrance to Megiddo. And I'll just leave it at that because I have a bigger picture of it on the next to last page. The next page has no pictures. I'm sorry, I try to have a picture every page for those that just do the pictures. And then you see a model of a chariot at Megiddo. It's again a wrought iron sculpture of sorts. You see it's 2 horses, and it's wide because there are 2 horsemen that ride this chariot. One mans the horses as they gallop through an army up on the ground. And The other is an archer who just rides through happily like the Grim Reaper, shooting arrows at the people standing on the ground or in other chariots. If you look for the wheels, see the wheels here? One of the things they did awful was attach short swords to the wheels, sharp as razor blades. And when they went through the crowd, guess what happens? You have a picture of that? So if the archer missed who was riding, you still got a lot of people on the ground. And we go then to page 6, which is the last page of text. And here we have this model again, and here you can see this huge gate structure. You say that looks like more than a gate. You see the road going up. Now, look again at the sides of the tell. They call it a glacis. That's a French word, I'm told. I don't know anything about French, but they say that stands for wall. Well, that is kept purposely bare. It's sufficiently steep. It's sufficiently steep that an army has trouble just as far as getting up that side. Then they have this flat area of the tell itself, and then the walls. And if you look over here to right in the lower center, these are what we call casement walls. They go in and out and in and out and in and out. The structure where you see the post there goes all the way through to a second wall. There are 2 walls here, about 10 feet apart, packed with dirt, so that a battering ram, if it hits the outside wall, does what? It packs the dirt tighter, and the wall doesn't give. Then if you look at the bottom, we see what's inside the Solomonic gate, we call it. Here is Megiddo. There is no aerial view of that, and it is not unstacked. This is what they dug and found. But it looks from the top, if you could get in a balloon that just hangs over it, you would have a picture like this and like this, like Gezer and Hatzor. Hatzor is pronounced H-A-Z, but the Z is pronounced like a T, Hatzor. Gezer, as it looks, and Megiddo. Now, if you look at the bottom, there's the graph, the latest 2000 and something graph of these 3 gates. You notice they're all 3 at the top, virtually identical. Even measurement in meters or feet, if we want to translate it, they will be exactly the same, those 3, which led Yehiel Yadin, I've talked about him before, a general of the Israeli Defense Force, but also a senior archaeologist who went through and did Masada and did these 3 cities all in the 1951 to 53 area. Now people coming after him challenge him. He ruled that all 3 of these gates that you see were from 1000 BCE or 950, depending on the day Solomon. Notice that Megiddo has a much heavier structure out in front of the gate. And look at that structure with me. You have 2 gates at the bottom. If chariots or horsemen are rushing in, the gate's relatively narrow. There are 2 gates they have to bash down first. Then you come here, there would have been a gate as you enter this gate structure. The structure was 2 stories high. So in each of these 6 chambers, you had 2 levels of archers. One are on the ground, one level's on the ground, the other's about 6 feet above it, maybe 8 feet, and also loaded with archers. So there are 12 places here, perhaps 2 archers across. So 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. Well, you've got 6 times 4, 24 archers on each side. It looks like to me that within the first 2 or 3 horsemen or chariot, they go and you've got a traffic jam, because in the middle of that narrow place, you've got wrecked chariots and dead soldiers. It seems virtually impossible to storm Megiddo, and probably even without this extra ramp here. The ramp made it, I mean, the extra ramp on Megiddo makes it easy. If you can imagine, speed is the only way you've got any hope of getting through this gate alive. So you're coming full blast through this area once it's been opened, and then you have to make a sharp left turn and go up here. Left turn takes away your speed, so that makes the six-chambered gate a double death trap. You follow what I'm trying to say? All right, that's what I wanted to show you. Those at home have hopefully downloaded the paper, or if you do download it, you'll remember what we said about those things. Christ is risen.
Yes, risen.
Hallelujah. Lord be with you.
And also with you.
And let us pray. Almighty and gracious and loving God, we give you thanks for the Sabbath day as we always do. You always know more than we know. You understand us far better than we know ourselves. Be with us now with the gift of your Spirit to give us wisdom, to give us understanding, and give us excitement about all the things you've done through history for our salvation and for your continuing hope for our repentance. Be with us now in this class. Give your Spirit to us who hear in us, to the one who speaks. And in all things, Father, give us rejoicing in Christ's name. Amen. Some people say to me at age 87, almost 88, why do you keep doing this? You know, I hope, among other things, to refresh the joy you've had when you went to the Holy Land. And if you've never been, to share the excitement of this place. We're going to talk about three cities, if you haven't been there, you've probably never heard of. Megiddo, Hatzor. Hatzor is up to the north, just below Dan. But if you don't know the whole land, you know where Dan is. Remember, Solomon ruled, as it says in the Bible, and it will say today, from Dan in the north to Bathsheba in the south. It was the size of Solomon's reign. It was awesome. I don't know that one kingdom ever ruled that much of land in Israel again. But Solomon was wise, and Solomon was blessed of God. So he did these things. So this up just below Dan, in the crevice of the rift of the Jordan Rift, that land formation that comes down like a valley all the way to the Red Sea. Up just below Dan is the city of Hatzor. Just in the middle, where you are near the Via Maris, coming up all the way from Africa, India, so forth, coming up to the Mount Carmel range. It's kind of long range. It's not one mountain, it's a stream of mountains. Talk about Mount Carmel. You're talking about a pretty sufficient range of mountains, but there is a pass in that mountain. And in that pass, remember, once again, they didn't have John Deere implements, bulldozers, not even explosives to blow open places in mountains if you want to get through. They had to go where the road was by God's hand. And there's a pass through Mount Carmel, right about parallel to Megiddo, so that you have a road from the east coming in to this place where Megiddo is, right in the center, up just under the Galilee. Then down southwest of Jerusalem, not very far southwest, but over by the Via Maris is Gezer. Three cities. And you say, why are you wasting our time with three cities we never heard of? Because it's part of understanding what's going on in our Bible. And this is just an incredible place, this place called the Holy Land. We're going to start with three texts today, and Sylvia's going to be our narrator. She always is, because she does it so well. If you ever do anything well in this class, you do. Sylvia, would you read for us again? Look at page 1, top of the middle of the page.
During Solomon's lifetime, Judah and Israel lived in safety, from Dan even to Beersheba, all of them under their vines and fig trees. Solomon also had 40,000 stalls of horses for his chariots and 12,000 horsemen. Those officials supplied provisions for King Solomon and for all who came to King Solomon's table, each one in his month. They let nothing be lacking. They also brought to the required place barley and straw for the horses and swift steeds, each according to his charge. 1 Kings chapter 4, verses 25 to 28. This is the account of the forced labor that King Solomon conscripted to build the house of the Lord and his own house, the Millo and the wall of Jerusalem, Hazor, Megiddo, and Gazer. 1 Kings chapter 10, verses 26 to 27. Solomon had 4,000 stalls for horses and chariots, and 12,000 horses, which he stationed in the chariot cities and with the king in Jerusalem. 2 Chronicles chapter 9, verse 25.
Well, there is the story of the three cities. There is the count, the census of the armament of Saul, except one difference. Two writers writing about 3 generations apart from each other have written this same history. Notice how close it is. In principle, it's awesome in both cases. Only difference was, in one case, there are 4,000 stalls for horses, and in the other case, 40,000. Now, is that a mistake of a copier? I don't know. But we know at Megiddo, for example, that already, and archaeologists firmly believe they'll find considerably more than that, 860 stalls. Well, that's still, if we multiply them by 4, why 4? Hazor, Megiddo, Gezer, Jerusalem. Remember, he's also kept a fortress in the capital city. We just don't have a count. Now, either we're talking about the sum total of the armament of Solomon, or we're talking about having that many in each of the 4 cities. I'm not entirely sure it matters a whole lot anymore. In biblical times, that was an unimaginable number. Just think, 40,000 stalls mean that you've got to feed, curry, take care of, and exercise and train 40,000 horses. First of all, you got to be able to buy them. The logistics of it, there isn't running water at Megiddo. You know how you get water? Look at that last page again. If you look in the upper right-hand corner, you'll see a round circle at Megiddo. I want to tell you what that round circle is. That's the water course. And where you get water, the way you get water is to go down that thing, and it's a round circle that you walk around like this till you get down and down and down and down and down to the level of a spring that runs on the edge of the mound. So you go down there and you walk the long pathway out to the spring, and you fill your jar with water, and then you walk back up the stairs. Now, 40,000 horses, just watering them. Now, whether Solomon had slaves or whether he paid his army, I don't know. But what I'm trying to say is, as we read our Bible and begin to think about what this means, it is unbelievable. What we're talking about here whether we're reading one writer, the writer of Kings, First and Second Kings, or the writer of First and Second Chronicles. When did they write? Oh, after the fall of Babylon, and the children of Israel are going. Well, first of all, the fall of Jerusalem, and children of Israel are going to Babylon in exile. One writes, talking about the glory of Solomon. That's where we get that 40,000 number. Then, when Cyrus allows the Babylonian captives to go home, they go home, and what do they find? I saw a television show recently that showed the people who survived the Holocaust coming home. It was a special of what it was like to come home. Remember what had happened. What we hadn't bombed out, the Nazis sold to somebody else. So there were people in my house, if my house still existed at all. So going back to Jerusalem was no great fun. Because the same thing had happened there. Squatters had taken over the land. And of course, we remember the Babylonians leveled just about everything, including the temple. So we have two different writers. One who saying to the exile, it's worth going home. And two saying, now that you're here, you can't lose heart. One is the chronicler, and one is the writer of Kings. It's in your first footnote, I think, for your second. Anyway, by the way, that footnote is not in big type because I wanted you to be sure you read it. It's in big type because I forgot to reduce it. So we talk about these things, and why was this so important to the ancients? And that's because there was always war in the place we call the Holy Land. If you think about it, and now I think I'm on page 2. If you think about it, the Holy Land has been a place of war for centuries. Remember I said, one of my Arab friends said to me one time, we have a saying, we were born in war and we'll die at war. That's a terrible saying. But it is the truth about the Holy Land. And one of the things that makes me fascinated in the study of it, and what makes me so excited wanting to share it with you, is it makes the Bible come alive in spades. Because you see, maybe the numbers are not exactly right between the chronicler and the kings, but the truth is the issue that you had to be armed to your teeth so that your people could live in peace. That's what it says about Solomon. His people lived in peace under the shade of their tree and so forth. The Palestinians have a saying today, if I have an olive tree and a loaf of bread, I can survive. Because the olive tree does all kinds of things. It makes lotion, it makes soap, it makes oil for the lamps in the house, and it makes cooking oil. If I have a loaf of bread and my olive tree, I can survive. That's why when Rome conquered the Holy Land, they chopped down the olive trees. What the Romans didn't know was they'll grow back every time you chop them down. But the Israelis know better. They take a bulldozer and the roots are up in the air exposed, they don't come back. The olive tree. All these things that you make nothing of that phrase, because they lived in peace, because under the shade of their orchards. Why was it like that? Now you've got to have a map, and I look and I look and I look and I look, because I wanted a map that showed you on the map where Hatzor is in the Jordan Valley before it is the Jordan, and then Megiddo, and then Gezer, which is southwest of Jerusalem over toward the sea via Morris. We're talking about roads now. If you look on that map, in your head. You've seen many maps of the Holy Land. If we were over in the big hall, I would have a map I could show you, but we're not in the big hall. So, and I'm not sure we could unbury it if we found it, but it looked kind of like this going down. If you look to the west, there's the Mediterranean Sea. If you look to the right, there's desert, arid, dry. So you've got this little strip of land, that's like a land bridge. Nations in the south coming up from the continent of Africa, from the continent of India, coming up from the south. They have to travel to get to the north. They have to travel in that relatively narrow, the widest space is about 60 miles. You say, that's pretty wide. Well, not when 10,000 are marching, it's not. And by the way, I didn't mention the cooks, the repairmen, the tradesmen to keep that army moving have got to march with them. So we're not talking about 10,000 soldiers. We're talking about twice that at least. At any rate, if Egypt wants to make war with the Hittites, they got to go north. If the Hittites and Assyrians want to make war with Egypt, they'd have to go south. And they both have to through this narrow strip of arable land we call the Holy Land. Everybody wants it. If it's peacetime, you want to be the one that owns the toll house so that you can place a tariff on the caravans or the individual merchants. If it's wartime, you want to defend whether you're an Assyrian wanting to keep the Egyptians out or the Egyptians wanting to keep the Assyrians out. Where you want to stop them is the narrowest place they can move. That is the Holy Land. So Solomon builds 3 chariot cities. Those are the cities of Gezer, Megiddo, and Hazor. One at the north, one at the south, and one right square in the middle to intercept the Carmel Pass. All right, let's move on. Let's finish the pictures. I guess I did finish the pictures. Okay. So that's what makes this a land bridge of sorts in ancient times. And as a result, these were the kinds of ways one went about fortification, and it was a serious business. I mentioned about knives on chariot wheels. You can imagine what that's like if you go through a crowd of horsemen even. Doesn't matter if you cut the legs off horses or man. I don't want to be so graphic, but it was that kind of time and that kind of place. I didn't mention on the last page. See, my shaky hands and the pages stick together. Well, trust me, on the last page, there's a big picture of what's called the Plains of Jezreel. We read that in the Bible, Jezreel, or the Plains of Armageddon. Now, nobody remembers Jezreel unless you read your Bible pretty faithfully. But because of the fundamentalists who still think the final battle is going to take place in Armageddon, Armageddon is a contraction of Megiddo, by the way. So if you stand on the top of Megiddo, you're looking on that picture from the Tel of Megiddo at the Plains of Armageddon. See it? Huge place. Why did the ancients think it was going to happen there? Because that was the only place in the Holy Land that was big enough to see the world's armies gathered in one last battle. Plains of Armageddon. Now, some battles did take place there. 2 that were victories for Israel and 2 that were terrible defeats for Israel. In fact, the first defeat of Israel was when Saul was killed at Beth Shean. That's in the same area. And Saul and his 2 sons are killed at Beth Shean, and they're nailed to the walls of the old city of Beth Shean. And those who go to the Holy Land can see Beth Shean and its Roman expression, but also you can go up to the top of the hill that was ancient Beth Shean. But I can tell you that Saul and his sons are not there anymore, because the night after the battle, they did go and take them down and take them back to safe place. Anyway, all of these things represent a land. Now, if you would go with me to the page of go with me to the page 6 and look again at the model of Megiddo. I'll come again now to this wall. We've talked about it already. The Chamberford Wall, as it's called, that goes around the whole circumference of Megiddo. By the way, what I don't show you in this paper plan too, which I ran out of space, is a Canaanite altar from 3000 BCE. Humongous thing. And it would be interesting to look at. It has big round altar made of stones. There'll be some things to see there. There's steps to go up to be on top of this flat altar. It's huge, and there are other ritualistic buildings related to it. It was a place of major sacrifice for the Canaanites. It's not built with cement, and all the stones are kind of loosely stacked. Why do you think that was? Well, the steps are obvious. You had to go up there and to lead an animal up there. These were sacrifice. If you had made a smooth place, what happens to the blood? Yeah. Solomon comes 15 occupations later. That's long since buried. Why is that significant? Only to say that 20 occupations, how do we know it's not 21? Well, simply we've dug down to bedrock and there's not going to be an occupation previous to that. The Canaanite altars and ritual buildings are on bedrock. So that's the model. All right, now look at that again. You see the casement walls. They're actually 2 walls, and they're about 10 feet apart. That's so that defendants of the city can shoot attackers coming up this slick side as they're coming up. The wall is about 12 feet tall by our measurement. It's pretty reasonably impregnable. By the way, Masada was the same way. And when the Romans came up the back ramp, we talked about that last week, when the Romans came up the back ramp with the battering ram, they battered the gate down, not the wall. Just an observation. No battering ram would be brought up at Megiddo. That would not be likely. Maybe it had soaring Gezer. My guess is Megiddo is the largest of the 3 cities and also represents more building beyond Solomon. Omri, Ahab, and Untitled, who are now kings of the northern kingdom, because Solomon has died. Rehoboam and Jeroboam have lost the north in their fights, sons of Solomon. So then we have Omri and Ahab as being 2, and Ahab finally rules. Remember, who does Ahab have a fight with? Elijah, wasn't it? Was Elijah the one that called the famine? the absence of rain. And Jezebel swore an oath to kill Elijah. Yeah. Okay, well, this is just about 30 years before the Assyrians sacked the 10 tribes of the north. Nancy, you can make a comment.
I have a question, but it's okay if you tell me it's for a different day. But I've been wondering since you talked about Armageddon, does the Lutheran Church have any particular position on Armageddon? Or like,
Well, it appears in the Bible twice, both times in the book of Revelation. And while we think the book of Revelation is speaking about God's finally, it's written to Christians under the persecution, saying God has the last word. This is the important thing. God has the last word. There is this vision of heaven, etc., etc. And the comment in the Revelation about Armageddon is primarily about sooner or later there's going to be a confrontation between God and evil, and they're going to lose. Now, whether we think it's going to be on the turf of Armageddon or there'll be an Armageddon style battle, I don't know if it matters much.
that answers it. Thank you.
Okay. Other questions? Well, you know, times have changed. Times have changed. In ancient times, it didn't do anything to beat an army unless you could possess the land. So it was a matter both of winning and of real estate, holding on to real estate. Do you understand what I'm saying? Turf doesn't mean as much today. When you have missiles that can fly from 100 miles away and go through a window place that you set as a target, you don't need to possess the land. You don't even need to go there to destroy it. So turf isn't quite the same. In the Holy Land, you needed not only to win over the army defending, but you had to be able to hold on to the land, or else it was a worse seesaw than it was in fact. But with the invention of the airplane, the method of war changes. Not only do you care about land bridges. The Holy Land was valuable in ancient times because it was a land bridge between the North and the South kingdoms. And so there were always people walking up and down that bridge, either merchants or armies. But it's changed now. With modern warfare, starting with the airplane, you don't have to walk troops to your enemy's turf. You can fly them there. So you don't need to worry about the land bridge very much. You would think it would change. But then there's politics and there's oil. And there was for a time a Cold War. And so the Holy Land ends up in the middle of it. Many nations became friends of one side of the Cold War, and many became friends of the other, and the war raged. But more basic than that is the fact that three religions, all claiming their roots in Abraham, is holy to all three. And they don't get along. So there was in my newspaper a picture of mourners in Palestine trying to carry a coffin of a Palestinian. You saw that picture? And the Israelis are beating them back with concussion bombs and what do they call them? Batons, you know. It's crazy. And emotion is, so I've been there when it's blown up. I was standing talking to a guard at the Holy Mount, at the Temple Mount some years ago, and there was a concussive sound that felt like it wrapped my belly around my backbone. And the Israeli guards at that entrance to the Temple Mount issued some Hebrew that I think probably was cursing, but I understand it. And they disappeared. And pretty soon they were back. And this is years ago. Pretty soon they were back. And I said, that didn't take long. And he said, well, somebody rolled a grenade out of a shop into the street. And fortunately, there was nobody in the street, so nobody was hurt. And I said, well, that's good news. And the Israeli soldier said, yeah, kind of. But, you know, somebody in that shop knew to roll that back out of the street, because you have so many seconds when you pull a pin before the thing goes off. If it had gone off inside the shop, it would have destroyed the shop, but nobody would have been alive. Because it went off in the street, nobody was harmed. I said, well, that's good news. And he smiled and he says, yeah, except you had to be militarily trained to know that. And somebody in that shop, some Palestinian in that shop, knew to get that grenade back outside, and we don't train Palestinians.
Oh.
It's tense. And it's not tense because it's a land bridge. It's tense now because 3 religious groups are pitted against each other. That was the same time I couldn't get out and I got interrogated and taken over, and they beat a baton on the table and wanted to know why I was there, because I'd been there 3 months on sabbatic. And they wanted to know who I talked to and where I stayed and all of that. And well, enough said. And for a long time after that, every time I went, I would be always the last one who would be released to board the plane. For a while, I finally got tired of doing that. But it is simply tense. And it's tense because we can't live together. But you see, followers of Muhammad believe in the prophets. They even believe Jesus Christ was a prophet. They say we have a right to evangelize you because you don't know about Muhammad, but we know about Jesus. That's their evangelism. We have the Hebrews, also rooted in Abraham. We have also Christians, followers of Islam, and Jews. So we go back to the same roots. And now the fighting is over the same places. Interestingly enough, we have another problem. It's okay within Islam to report, teach, and live in history that supports Islam, but not if it doesn't. So for more than 10 years, the official history of the Palestinian people shows no evidence that the Jews ever were in the Holy Land. Now, there's archaeological evidence, we've been talking about it here, for example. It says that they are. And they're there, they see the archaeology. For example, the archaeological team at Tel Aviv dug in the Holy Land in the 70s. And they particularly studied the Temple Mount. And they found remnants of things we hadn't known were there on the Temple Mount. As soon as that was published, the Temple Mount is in control of Islam, not the mount itself, but the top of it. In the '67 war, when Israel reconquered Jerusalem, before sundown, Yedid, our friend, returned the operation and management of the Temple Mount to the Islamic authorities. Brilliant political move, and it's been there ever since, by the way. But the chief imam of the Temple Mount allowed gardening of the top of the Temple Mount. How about that? So there's trees and other things. where Tel Aviv had discovered some interesting remnants. And it's okay to destroy history. You can't live with it, whether you're writing a history or digging a temple mound. The different concerns about our traditions. All I'm trying to say is it's not a land bridge anymore to anywhere. It's just a place where three religions all want to call it home and haven't been able to resolve those differences. Now, almost I've ended on time. Well, there are questions. I find the story of how they lived in Solomon's time and how Solomon and his successors managed to maintain control of the Holy Land for about 1,000. Well, let me think about it just a moment. Beginning about 1200 until about 200 BCE, so not quite 1,000 years, but pretty close to that. Was in Jewish hands and under Jewish control. Questions, comments? Yes, Brenda.
This is real basic, but Muhammad, when is Muhammad's time?
About 400, 500.
BCE or
AD.
The reason the Crusades ever happened
Okay.
was because Islam came from its roots in Arabia,
Oh my goodness.
okay, and took over the Holy Land, and therefore the Holy Father called for a campaign to take away the Holy Land from the infidels. So, and the Holy Land, the Crusades begin in the 12th century. But they had been in the Holy Land for a while by then. Other questions? Thank you much. I promise to return back to some more familiar turf. Next week, we'll go to the Galilee, and we'll go to Magdala. All of us know about Mary Magdalene, Mary from Magdala. We'll go to Magdala. Not a lot to see there, but now it's finally open and can be visited by tourists. And just some significant stuff. We'll brush by it and look at it. Then we'll go on to up around to Capernaum, Caesarea Philippi, if we can get there. It's all the way around on the Syrian side, but we don't have to go there. And the Israelis still have it under their control. And Capernaum, of course. And where else? Well, 3 or 4 places in Galilee. Then we'll come down to look at Jerusalem. And then if we have a class, and we may not, if we have a class on Pentecost Sunday, we'll go look at the upper room, because the recent excavations there have most everybody agreeing that's the place of Pentecost, which is the upper room. Remember that after the resurrection, disciples pretty much tended to gather in the upper room. It was a large place. The census in the early book of Acts, chapter 1 or 2, chapter 1 of the book of Acts say that the gathering of the faithful in the upper room numbered about 120. That's a big room. Although you could put 120 people in here if you didn't sit down. So anyway, we'll go there and look at that if there's a class. If there's not, the paper for that will be on a chair in this, and you can pick it up when you come to church. Now, the reason I'm saying that is I have heard what the pastor's thinking, but I keep searching. He hasn't announced what he's thinking yet, so we may change our schedule. You
Would
didn't
you-
hear it here, I'll lie about it. Thank you so much. You've been so faithful. Just joy to be here with you. Thank you.